BioWare has renamed Dragon Age Dreadwolf to Dragon Age the Veilguard. And given the fact that they've put the spotlight on themselves, it has come to light that the game's director, a man who claims to be a woman and calls himself Corrine Bush, and also refers to himself as a queer-sexual gendermancer, has described the game as, quote, inherently queer. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. I wrote this up over at thatparkplace.com. And we had this blog post from bioware titled The Next Dragon Age Has a New Title. It's not credited to anyone. It's just credited to BioWare as the author. None of the actual executives wrote it, or it's not credited to them. But this is what it said. Basically explaining the change in the title is because they did not want to put the focus on the enemy, but rather the player and his companions. The blog post said this: naturally, the Dreadwolf still has an important part in this tale, but you and your companions, not your enemies, are the heart of this new experience. So to capture what this game is all about, we changed the name as the original title didn't show just how strongly we feel about our new heroes, their stories, and how you'll need to bring them together to save all of Thedas. We proudly introduce to you Dragon Age the Veilguard. So just to give you some background on the lore, BioWare previously revealed that the Dreadwolf was Solus, one of the companions introduced in Dragon Age Inquisition. They shared this cinematic from the game back in December 2022. A narrator says this as the cinematic plays. You can watch the cinematic here in the article if you want, which I will have in the description below. But the narrator says, I knew him as Solus, a thoughtful mage obsessed with dreams, but long ago he had a different name, Fen-Harel, the Dreadwolf. Ancient elven god of lies or heroic rebel against tyranny, depending on which story you believe. In his final fight with the elven gods, Solus imprisoned them and created a veil that split our world from the raw magic of the Fade. It then continues saying, but now he wanted to tear down that veil and destroy the world, and we're the only ones who can stop him. So there you go. That's where they get the name the Veilguard, because you're defending the veil from Solus trying to destroy it. Or at least that's what it seems like. Given that they have changed the name and they announced that they're going to do a new spotlight on the game, there has been obviously attention put on the game. And former World of Warcraft team lead Mark Kern brought the game director's mental illness to a more widespread public. As I noted, the game director is a man pretending to be a woman. He calls himself Corrine Bush. His profile on X describes him as a queer-o-sexual gendermancer and a supporter of Black Lives Matter, as well as a quote-unquote trans woman. Doesn't exist. He is a man. So let's take a look at this here. You can see, there it is right there. There it is right there. You can see game director of Dragon Age, Dreadwolf, hasn't updated for the new title yet. Describes himself as a trans woman. Queer-o-sexual gendermancer. Opinions are my own. Hashtag trans rights. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. I did some further research into this. There is a developer story that BioWare has published to its website where Bush reveals his identity as a queer trans woman has indeed been injected into the game. He says this: as a queer trans woman, I have a perspective on the games that not everyone has. Dragon Age has long been a place where LGBTQIA+ folks can see people like themselves represented respectfully. It's inherently very queer, and it's such a rare thing for marginalized communities to have representation where we feel proud and powerful in how we are depicted. Bush added this: it's so deeply meaningful for so many. I often get emotional when I think about what it would have meant for a younger version of myself to see someone like her in a game and as a hero, no less. So literally trying to target young people with this evil ideology, these degenerate lifestyles that only lead to destruction. Nevertheless, he goes on and says, I hope we can be a safe place for our queer players to know they are not alone, that they are brilliant and worthy, that they are not only welcome, but celebrated. We should not be celebrating these sinful lifestyles whatsoever. We should be calling these people to return to God and live chaste lifestyles and reject the sin of homosexuality and homosexual acts. He also goes on to note that this perspective, this vision he has, is indeed something he is putting into the game as the game director. Game directors are sometimes thought of as big personalities who are singularly responsible for the purity of their creative vision. But for me, it's really about being a steward for the vision that we have as a team, have collectively defined. I get a high-level view of everything as it's coming together and can steer the project as it does. So he's clearly steering the project with this whole inherently queer perspective that he has on it. Also of note, he calls himself a queer trans woman. So he's literally just a dude who likes women. He goes on and says, but ultimately it's about empowering people to work together, play with ideas, offer critiques, and make decisions. There you go, make decisions. All to help create a cohesive experience for the player. He also said this, in Dragon Age, you can be who you want to be, explore the possibilities and consequences of your choices, and build relationships that leave a lasting impression. Few games give players that kind of autonomy while also weaving such a rich narrative. I think it really speaks to why our players feel so invested in this world. And then the rest of the article is just kind of how this BioWare has lost a ton of talent, like top executives, people that have been with this company like 19, 12, 20 years in the middle of development on this game. Some of their top developers and top executives like left it. If you want to read that, you can. As I said, I'll have the link in the description below. But as far as I'm concerned, this game's dead on arrival. It might be the end of BioWare. This game might be the end of BioWare if they cannot save it with the Mass Effect game that I guess they're working on as well. But when you do stuff like this, you have someone leading the game like this, you just know it's going to be full of all kinds of propaganda. And as Isaac Young here points out, separating art from the artist was always a leftist rhetorical trick, and it was thrown out immediately when it was the right wing who were out of power. So you can't separate the art from the artist. Tolkien has talked about that with the Lord of the Rings. He knows how he was a Catholic and he injected that into the Lord of the Rings. And that's why the Lord of the Rings is so good, because it gives you a glimpse of the Evangelium, the most powerful narrative, the narrative of Christ, who, it's not just a narrative, it's real, who died for our sins and offers us salvation if we follow his commands. So, as I said, this game, dead on arrival. You cannot separate the art from the artist. It is a rhetorical trick. And this person is literally telling you you can't do that because he is declaring that the game is inherently very queer. It's right there. It's inherently very queer. What does that translate to? It translates to dead on arrival, sales in the toilet. You wasted, I don't even know how long they've been developing this game, at least half a decade, and people just aren't going to buy it, and they're not going to put up with it. But let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, but to always speak the truth.